welcome to Love and Responsibility, New Jersey! We've been putting together this series and bringing local talent from New Jersey, music, speakers, and we want to bring out the gift and talents that God has given to you. And so this is the opportunity that we have today as an Archdiocese to speak to our young adults here in New Jersey as well.
So welcome, hi, my name is Mimi and welcome to Love and Responsibility, New Jersey again. This evening we have Trust, Intimacy, and Love, which will be addressing various types of friendships and maturity, especially with the opposite sex. Brian and Eni Honsberger, both athletes at Rutgers University, and met while getting ready for practice in the training room. They dated for 4 years before marrying in 2009. Eniola, raised as a non-denominational Christian, became Catholic in 2010. Amen. She now serves as the Director of Family Life in the Diocese of Patterson, focusing on the theology of the body, marriage preparation, and natural family planning. And will be completing her master's degree in moral theology in 1 week. Yay, amen. Yeah. Director of Evangelization for the Diocese of Patterson at St. Paul's Inside the Walls, coordinating the Diocesan Departments of Youth Ministry, Campus Ministry, Young Adult Ministry, as well as coordinating RCIA, Facilities and Strategic Planning at St. Paul Inside the Walls. He holds a master's degree in theology with a concentration in biblical studies. Please give a warm welcome to Brian and Eni Honsberger. So before they begin their talk, please bow your heads so we can ask the Holy Spirit to continue to stay with us during their talk. Okay. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Holy Spirit, please give us open hearts and minds to hear, accept, and live out the words of this evening and this Love and Responsibility series. Be our guidance in this life to follow Christ as best we know how. Give us the strength and courage to live the word and spread the word to others that they may see you in us. May you use Brian and Eniola as your disciples and speak through them to relay your message. Thank you for the opportunity of this 4-week series, and may there be growth and change in this experience. Amen. Amen. Brian and Eniola, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Archdiocese of Newark. You guys have a special place in my heart, although I am born and raised in the Diocese of Patterson. I went to school at Rutgers, Newark, where I met Brian. I know some of my friends in the room. Omar, hi. And we also got married in the Archdiocese of Newark, over in the cathedral. So this place has a special a place in our heart, and when Father John Gordon called and asked us, well, we said yes. It's Father John. Can't say no.
And thanks for the Archdiocese of Newark for having us. There's a lot of staff of the Archdiocese here, so thanks for your hospitality. All right, so who here has been to a Love and Responsibility or Theology of the Body talk before? Decent number. Who here has read Love and Responsibility? Who here has read the book that we're talking about today, which is a book about love and responsibility by Ted Tree? Okay, so Edward Tree. He's my professor, I know.
I call him Ted.
All right. And lastly, who has read Theology of the Body? Okay, all right. So some of you here, I've talked to you before this talk, before we started talking, and you guys could give this talk. Some of you can give this talk. So some of you have some experience with this stuff, and therefore I'm going to give it to you. Is that okay? Perfect. Yeah. Did you guys have a long day at work?
Very.
Yeah? Yeah. Because we could keep it easy, or we could give it to you. So so let me know if I go too fast. But Eni and I were married 8 years. We're more in love now than we were when we got married. Is that true?
Yes.
So I think we're here, and I think Father John and others invited us here because we're married for 8 years and we're very, very happy. We're in love with each other, and we grow in love for one another every year. I can't say every day. But every year there's definitely, it's like the stock market. It's like the stock market. Up and down, up and down. And I have to say, our meeting, Mimi, thanks for introducing us, and Father Bismarck, thanks. Mimi mentioned that we met at Rutgers University in the training room, getting ready for practice. So, do you guys know I'm a biblical guy? Do you guys know where Isaac and Rebecca met? They met at a what? A well, yeah. Jacob and Rachel, a well. Moses and Zipporah, a well. Jesus met the church, the sinful woman, where? At the well. Guess where Eni and I met? In a hot tub. In the training room. But it was one of those metal hot tubs that you stick your knees in. It's not as sexy.
We were in separate tubs. I was icing after practice. He was heating up in a separate tub. He always loves using that story. So, happily married 8 years. Thank God for that. This is our wedding day over in the cathedral. It was like yesterday.
I think I see my head.
Yeah, so it's that was a beautiful day. At this moment, I actually wasn't Catholic. So now that I am Catholic, I obviously receive all those graces. But it was a beautiful, awesome day, and we really relive this moment every day. Every day that we wake up, see each other, he's next to me, is remembering this day exactly. So my maiden name was Eni Honsberger. I'm Nigerian by birth. I was born and raised here, but my parents are Nigerian. And so growing up, I always thought, I can't wait to get married because I'm going to marry like a Smith or a Jones, something with like 5 letters at the most. And then I meet this guy, and very soon after meeting each other, I knew he was the one. And then he told me his last name. And I'm like, oh gosh, well I'm not gonna be a jerk and hyphenate it, so drop that. But my last name, my maiden last name, means defeat the white man. I'm not kidding. So it's funny because I never know if that means I defeated or I defeated, I never know.
And you guys know my last name, right? It's Honsberger. So from Fagiembo to Honsberger. All right. So who here thinks, or at least knows people who think that Catholicism is a ruly religion? Lots of rules. All right. It could be at least characterized as ruly and overly ruly. And who here thinks of Pope Francis as kind of forget about the rules, right? Raise your hands. Forget about the rules. Yeah, rules aren't that important. Who am I to judge, right? But I like to think about. I think I interpret Pope Francis differently, and I know David Hajduk 2 weeks from now, he interprets Pope Francis very differently too. We don't see the Catholicism of Pope Francis in competition with one another. We actually see them in very much in union. But the secret to understanding Pope Francis and Catholicism in general is rules. What does it say? Relationship first, rules second. Let's think about that with dating. Who here is dating somebody right now? A couple, okay. So, first date. We all remember our first date, right? Imagine the man and the woman sitting down at the dinner table and one of them starting conversation off by saying what we can't do as a couple. Date number 1. We can't have sex before we're married, right? We're Catholic, right? And because of that, we definitely can't kiss in a way that will lead to sex, and we also can't live together before we get married. And by the way, once we do get married, we can't use contraception. How does that date end? How does that date end? That's the first and the last date, right? And if you talk about that stuff on your first date, you're a weirdo. You're a weirdo, right? And you're going to be single for a while. I guarantee. So now let's think about it another way. All right. So you sit down, you get to know each other after a date, after maybe 2 dates, 3 dates, and then all of a sudden chemistry is starting to develop, and all of a sudden you start thinking of yourself long-term with this other person, and all of a sudden rules start making sense, right? Like exclusivity. Can you imagine if the chemistry is building up, you're starting to really fall in love with this person, and then you find out they're dating somebody else, right? Not cool. So rules all of a sudden started making a lot of sense in the context of relationship. So in Catholicism, we have all these rules, right? But if we don't have a relationship with God first, those rules seem imposed, arbitrary,
Silly.
Just what?
Silly.
Silly, yeah. Yeah, and bossy. So the church can come across as ruly. All right, so I want to think about Pope Francis and about the rules of Catholicism in that context. And we're going to talk about free will and the dignity of the human, but we have to start with the purpose of creation. The purpose of creation is the secret to our relationship. So why would God create? I'm just going to ask questions, and you're going to say no really quick, okay? Did God create because he was lonely? No. Did God create because he was bored?
No.
Was he experimenting?
No.
Was he trying to show off? Keep it there. So, why would he create? What do you think? Why would God create? What? I heard love, union, all are correct, right? Did you ever go to an awesome restaurant on your first date? Did you ever go to an awesome restaurant? If you go to a great new restaurant, you have to share it with somebody, right? There's something about sharing good things that's kind of a must for us. If we experience something that's awesome, we're basically a jerk if we don't share it. Do you ever go to a great restaurant and then give it a negative review so nobody else goes? Nobody does that, right? You want to give it a good review, you want to encourage other people to go, because if you like those other people, you'd be a jerk not to share good things. So God is this happy, unified, triune, relational God, and he's perfectly happy by himself. Why does he create? It's a desire to share. And what does he want to share? Love. Now, can love be forced? If I'm a man and I see a pretty woman and I want to offer the woman a flower, what's the best thing she could do in return?
Bath her lashes.
Bath her lashes, yes, sure. Her receiving the flower, right, is a gift. And what if I were to force the flower on her? Take this flower, right? Is that love? No, it's force. So love has to be something that's freely chosen. So God creates us out of love, but can he force us to love him back? No. Therefore, he has to give us the free will, number one. And number two, he tries to convince us to love him back without tampering with that free will. And it takes him a while. Do you notice the whole Bible, Old Testament, he's running after humanity, and humanity is just running away from God. And when does God catch up with humanity? It's with the person of Jesus that he finally catches up, right? All right. And by the way, free will is messy, right? Like if God's going to allow people to not love him back, things could get ugly, right? So, you guys know this from the Sistine Chapel? Yeah. This hand is God's. This hand is Adam's. The purpose of this painting is not to show that God is a old, white-haired, Caucasian male, right? The goal is look at the vigor in God's hand, how interested he is, and notice the interest of Adam's hand, right? God's mission is to make Adam's hand filled with vigor. Okay? All right. So what did God create when he created us as human beings? Is God did God create us as angels or as animals? Let's define, let's ask sub-questions to answer the main question. What is an angel? Does an angel have a body, or is it spirit?
Spirit.
It's spirit, right? Does it have the free will to choose, or is it more mechanical?
Free will.
Yeah, if you notice the separation of the light and the darkness in Genesis chapter 1 happens before the creation of the sun and the moon, right? It's actually darkness and lightness referring to spiritual beings. So they have free will and they have spirit. What about animal? Spiritual or physical? They're physical, carnal, right? Do they have free will or instinct?
Free.
Instinct, all right? Which one is human?
Neither.
Both, right? Somebody said both. We're both, we're hybrid, right? Do we have free will?
Yes.
Do we have spirit?
Yes.
Do we have body?
Yes.
Do we have instinct?
Yes.
Do we have the ability to control our digestion, the movement from the food from our stomach to our intestines? No. Do we have control over eating? Yes. If you read the Bible, ancient Jews would rather die than eat pork, right?
Someone said no.
Well, it's funny. The purpose, my point here is that we are in control, right? Society right now is trying to tell us that we are actually not in control of our actions, that we're more animal, right, than free will being. But I guarantee you, each of you here has control over what you do. So those actions, like eating, drinking, relationships, sex, we have control over those faculties. All right. So what's the result of each person having free will? What's the result? The result of free will is complete and utter uniqueness and unrepeatability. Is that a word? Irrepeatability?
It is tonight.
Yeah. So even if you share the same genetic code, like an identical twin, the moment those two identical borns reach the age of reason, they go in different directions. They become different people, right? Why? Because of that free will. They're able to choose their actions, and the actions will change their future actions and so forth. All right, and Jesus proves that because every individual is entirely unique and unrepeatable, that they're invaluable. So what is the value of each human being here? You guys know this really weird story of Jesus and the demoniac in the Decapolis, where this guy is possessed with like 1,000 demons? Jesus, he sacrifices a herd of 2,000 animals for the sake of one human being. It destroys the economy of that town. It destroys, worth hundreds of thousands of dollars or more, and he sacrifices all of that worth just for one human being, one soul. So the point of that story is the value of each person. All right, and this is where we get into the book. All right, so Dr. Ed Shree is my professor, and I studied him greatly. He studies John Paul II quite a bit, and if you start reading the book, if you came to this talk so you don't have to read the book, this is when you start listening. Okay, so the foundational principle of our relationships is that the other is infinitely valuable and unrepeatable. All right, so every relationship that we have, this is the basic principle, whether it's marriage, whether it's somebody you don't even know. And who is the other, by the way? I'll tell you the answer. Who is the other? Anybody who's not you. Anybody who's not you. This is another great one from John Paul II. The greater the feeling of responsibility for the person, the more true love there is. Think about the different types of people. You might feel responsibility for your spouse, right? You might feel responsibility for your siblings or your children. Isn't it true that we're starting to shy away from responsibility for our parents? Isn't that true? How about the people you know? Are you responsible for them? The people you don't know. The driver who just cut me off on the way here on 280. Your boss, your employees, political opponents. Are you responsible for your political opponents? It's hard, right? This is a hard teaching. I think we all think we're responsible for poor people. What about rich people? So I hope this makes it clear. We're responsible for every human being, whether we know them or not, whether we like them or not, whether we agree with them or not. It was very, very conservative in the time of Thomas Aquinas to study Plato. Thomas studied Aristotle, and now we all do. So now it's cool. But he gives 3 types of friendships, and I give talks just about this slide. So there's a lot to say here that I'm not going to say, but you all know the friendship of utility, right? Remember the kid down the street who had the pool? Everybody was his friend in the summer, and then in the winter, like, oh, you know, I'm busy. Right? The friendship of convenience, right? When things are going well, they're by your side, and then when you really need help, they're nowhere to be seen, right? We all know those. And then there's the virtuous friendship. So Aristotle makes this really interesting point, and Aristotle interprets friendship as the secret to happiness. So you have to remember this. He thinks that happiness is the result of being in friendships and relationships where no one is being used. Nobody's being used as a tool, like that utilitarian one. So how do you get into a relationship where nobody's used? He argues that it's actually if you have the same common goal. You have to agree, in other words. You have to agree religiously. You have to agree politically. You have to agree on certain common goals. And that, like just imagine if 2 people are walking side by side towards a common goal. Isn't it possible that, isn't it less likely they'll use each other and actually kind of work with one another? So that's his argument. I think it's a good argument. And John Paul II uses this as his basis for love and responsibility. So I have to admit, though, there is a way to use people, even though if you agree, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Has anybody noticed or been on a team where there's one guy who's selfish, hogging the basketball? We live in New York City. I'm not going to name names in New York Knicks, but but we all know we've all been on teams like that, or been in work relationships like that, right? So it's not a perfect solution, but it is a solution. So you can see how this gets into marriage, right? Think about married couples. Do they have a common mission? Yeah. So there's less likelihood for use.
Yeah, so this is, a lot of times people think that, okay, you know, once you get married, you're all on the same page, you went through pre-Cana, you guys had the discussions that need to be had, and you're set. And then reality sets in. And then you realize that there are some things that you actually don't agree about. There are things that you're not on the same page with. And so in this relationship where you're supposed to be moving together, you actually find yourself moving further apart because it's no longer about the common goal, that common mission, but it's about how can I get what's best for me in this relationship, and the other person's looking at it the same way. So really, this happens in marriage a lot, which is why the divorce, they used to call it the 7-year itch, when couples used to start getting the inkling to leave. Well, now it's the 3-year itch, right? So we're seeing this happen more and more.
Yikes.
All right, so what are the 2 missions, according to John Paul II, that Edward Shree talks about in his book? There's 2 main missions in marriage that are the main focus. So, helping each other grow in holiness is one, procreation and raising children is the other. Do you think they're different missions? Like, take a close look at them. Do they look different? No. I think they're different. Let me explain why.
He loves doing that to people.
So the lower one, procreation and the raising of children, that's kind of like teamwork, right? It's 2 people working towards one goal, and they work side by side to achieve that goal. But the helping each other grow in holiness, is that a side-by-side mission? Really, the mission the mission is the spouse. The mission is your spouse. So does every couple have children? No. And is it possible to use somebody even though you share the same mission? Possible, yes. Improbable, yes, but possible. that top one is, and oh, by the way, has anybody heard of couples that get married, have kids, married for 30 years, and then they get divorced once the kids move out? Yes. Right? So what's the primary and everlasting vocation or mission in marriage? It's the first one, right? And what's unique about it is that the mission itself, the mission is the other. And this is what the genius of marriage is. All right, so now we're going to get to Edward Shree. So in his book, he gives this great quote, and this is in the context of marriage. I'll let you read it. So this is a paraphrase of what Jesus says in Matthew 19, and guess what his apostles say when he defines marriage in this way? They say it's better not to marry. Is this marriage a selfish marriage where you get everything you want? No, this marriage is a total gift of self for the benefit of another, which doesn't sound so fun. Think about it. Think about it. You're giving yourself completely to another person. That's not fun unless, right? Unless your spouse is giving their entire self to you. Does that sound like fun?
Yes.
Yeah, in fact, it's better than caring about yourself, and it brings more happiness. I have a question to Professor Shree. Am I supposed to completely give myself to all people, some people, or just one person? Sincerely, Eni Honsberger. And don't I look like that king there? Don't I look the same? Nice.
I did not see this slide. I can't believe it.
Where was that?
Just to remind you of the question was, is it possible for me to give myself to more than one person? To many people, to one person? This is Dr. Shree responding. Brian, I'm surprised you didn't know the answer to this. God, who is infinite, is capable of giving his entire self to all people, but humans are finite, right? There's only one of us. Is it mathematically possible for me to give my entire self to more than one person? No. Can I give myself 100% to more than one person? No, because I'm a finite being, right? So this whole idea of marriage is that I give myself completely to one other. There's this exclusivity that's required for finite human beings. But does that mean that we only put our energies towards one person? Dr. Shree gives examples. So St. Paul talks about this in the Bible. And St. Paul, when he wrote to the Philippians, he was writing to a Greek audience, right? They spoke Greek, they knew Greek philosophy. He's quoting Aristotle, or at least paraphrasing Aristotle here, and his Nicomachean ethics, and those three types of friendship that we were talking about, right? This is what he says. Complete my joy by being of the same mind, with the same love, united in heart, thinking one thing. What is he saying? He's saying to agree, right? To share the same common mission. So he's saying, basically, to the Philippians, use that type of friendship called virtuous friendship. So St. Paul continues by saying, do nothing out of selfishness or vainglory. Rather, humbly regard others as more important than yourselves. Right? This is starting to sound a lot like the gospel, right? A lot like Jesus. Look out not for your own interests, but look out for the interests of others instead. Right? So does the married person care, give themselves completely to their spouse and then not care about anybody else? No. So the personalist principle that John Paul II talks about in his Love and Responsibility, it applies to everybody, but especially, and most especially to that spouse. Is everything that John Paul II, Dr. Shree, things that I'm saying, isn't this quite countercultural to care about other people instead of yourself? Right? Do we not live in a society of hedonism where we think that we should seek pleasure and avoid pain? Isn't that what we've been told will bring us happiness? So what, especially, I'm going to pick on men now, because I'm a man. Men, I know each of you in this room right now are at least somewhat attracted to the idea of sleeping with as many beautiful women as possible, right? It's something that society has ingrained in our minds as what makes us happy. The lucky men are the ones who get to sleep with all kinds of beautiful women. What does Jesus say? Jesus says, instead of variety bringing happiness, it's actually intimacy. It's devoting yourself to one person for a lifetime. And is that variety, devoting yourself to one person for a lifetime? No, but it's something greater than variety. To know my wife deeper in a deeper and deeper way over our lifespans has brought me an incredible amount of joy. Remember how I started this talk and why we're here today? Because we're happy. If I was not happy, I would not want to spend my Wednesday night here talking to you about this. I'm here because I want to share it, because I want to share my joy, right? All right. And this is how Dr. Sri ends one of his chapters, chapter 6, I believe, in his Men, Women, and the Mystery of Love. I'm going to read these off for you. So this is what intimacy is to Brian Honsberger. Learning more and more about your spouse over time. The faults of your spouse become obvious, right, babe? You don't like these faults, right, babe? You love your spouse despite these faults. I know that's the case for both of us. You love your spouse for who they are, not for who you want them to be. And isn't that weird? Right? Isn't that weird to love somebody for who they are, not for who you want them to be? So this is reality. And what's a dream world? If you're living in a dream world if you love a person for who they can be, right? Is that not a dream world? Isn't that the definition? All right, so it's a real type of relationship. It's a mature relationship. Love deepens over time. We have experienced that in our 8 years of marriage. And you gently help your spouse improve. Remember, one of the 2 main missions of marriage is to help each other grow in holiness, correct? So does this stuff sound familiar? Love despite offenses, love defined as total gift of self. Who does this sound like? He's over there, he's behind the screen. And he's not on a cross here, but picture in your mind, close your eyes if you have to, Jesus on the cross. He's hanging there and his body is on the cross. Where is his blood? Where is all the water in his body? It's on the ground, right? So when St. Paul says in Philippians chapter 2 that Jesus emptied himself, the Greek word is kenosis, what is he saying? He's saying Jesus' definition of love, and this was his greatest moment as he was on the cross, his greatest moment of joy, happiness, love, self-sacrifice, was when he emptied every liquid he could out of his body and it was poured out onto the ground for his beloved. So this is the idea of Christian love. All right. So remember we talked about intimacy. Now we're going to talk about variety. So this is Brian Honsberger's idea of variety. This is the bad guys. You are attracted to the repeatable qualities of your spouse. So you all know, guys, how we have a taste in women, right? We like curves in certain places, right? The repeatable qualities, that's what I'm saying. People other than your spouse have repeatable qualities. Other women look good, no? You are drawn towards intimacy with other people. Then your tastes start changing. Then your spouse gets old. You are no longer attracted to your spouse. And then all of a sudden marriage doesn't make sense anymore. You guys have all seen this happen to certain couples, right? Yeah. So this is the idea of variety. If my definition of relationships is what can people do for me, especially in the marriage context, the marriage cannot last. All right, and this goes back to creation. So I want you to remember this quote. This is our second last slide. The purpose of creation is the secret to relationship. So remember, what was the purpose of creation? To share love, right? To share self. The purpose of creation is the secret to relationships. And that goes for marriage and every other type of relationship. We're going to finish with a quote from Pope Benedict XVI. So let's read it together. Love is indeed ecstasy. Not in the sense of a moment of intoxication, but rather as a journey, a lifelong journey. An ongoing exodus out of the closed and inward-looking self, towards its liberation through self-giving, and thus towards the authentic self-discovery, and indeed the discovery of God. Isn't that a beautiful quote? And think about self-discovery. We haven't talked a lot about that, but what's the secret? I don't know if any of you have having like identity problems or anything, probably not, but what's the secret to, Socrates says, know thyself, right? What's the secret to knowing yourself and discovering yourself? It's not in searching within always, right? Sometimes you only find yourself by giving yourself away. And by that act of giving yourself away, especially in a vocation, whether it's a religious vocation, priestly vocation, marriage vocation, as soon as you start giving yourself away and completely, or at least start trying, then you all of a sudden start experiencing happiness. And it's so funny because a lot of things in religion are not testable, not scientifically provable, right? But this is. So if anybody here is questioning what I'm saying, or if you go and talk about this to somebody else who questions what you're saying, all you have to do is say, try it out. Because this is testable. Live 2 weeks as a hedonist, seeking pleasure and avoid pain. Tell me how you feel, right? And then spend the next 2 weeks practicing altruism, caring more about other people than yourself. And let me know after the month how you feel. I guarantee it works every time. It works every time. All right, so next week we're going to talk about attractions and distractions. So we're going to get more into relationships between men and women. This was kind of more broad. All right, thanks.
Yourself to tease us.